Hi everyone, it's Henry here. Now, White Dwarf 218 back in the 90s had, as I suspect it had on tens of thousands of people, a huge impact on me. Very, very memorable. It was it contained the first part in the first ever Tale of Four Gamers series. And within that, one of the participants, Paul Sawyer, Fat Bloke, who was the editor of White Dwarf at the time, he created this amazing black-skinned, black-furred Beastmen army. And it's something that I have wanted to do ever since then, ever since I was a kid. And some of you may know, that, or some may not, that Paul sadly passed away a month or so back now. And I wanted to do something to as a tribute, as an homage, as a thank you, really, to him. And I knew that the Beastmen book for Old World was coming out in the not-too-distant future, and Games Workshop then sent us through for review the new Kralmaw model. And I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to do that, but also the perfect opportunity for me to try and continue some of the stuff that I was learning and discovering in that recent Death Guard video that I enjoyed doing so much. So whilst this is a tutorial, it's also going to be another one of me trying different things out, trying to not do things the same way, learn some new stuff. Some of it may even work, who knows. We'll have a sort of look back at the end and see what did and what didn't. But really just try and relax and enjoy and remember about everything that I enjoy about doing in this hobby. Enough waffle, less paint. So first up, it's going to be the fur and the skin, for that matter. I cover both of those things at this stage. Now, one of the things I was really concerned about with this project was I have a tendency, I think, to create quite murky, quite dark, quite boring paint jobs, and it's something that my gaming group, particularly Dan, enjoys reminding me or bringing up. So I was determined with this that whilst I wanted to use blacks and browns and greys and all of that, I wanted to try and get as much colour in as possible to each sort of individual stage, or each individual usage of those colours. So to that end, the first colour I'm applying here is a grey, and I've used Rakarth Flesh to create that grey. So I've mixed that into some black, and I have done a very, very simple sort of two-stage zenithal highlight on the miniature for this. So by that I mean I've sprayed the first mix on at roughly 45 degrees, and then I've then sprayed the second highlight on almost directly from above, just focusing on those areas of focal points, but also like areas that are perpendicular to that light source coming from above. And then if there were any areas that I sort of got overspray on or lit up that I didn't want to, I went back in with Black Legion, which is a very, very black, strong black contrast paint, and I sprayed that from directly underneath to bring back some of that shadow. Now I'm spraying at about 20 psi. I'm using a 0.4mm needle and nozzle. In this case, I'm using our Harder and Steenbeck signature series Infinity. More news on that coming very, very soon. Basically, they're all coming back in. We've got a new range coming out, which I'm very, very excited about. But yeah, so that was the first step. Nice and simple, because again, I want this to be army painting. I want to be able to replicate this across a force should I so wish to go and do that. And the next stage was something that I particularly enjoyed doing on the Death Guard miniature, which was applying that oil wash essentially over a pre-shade. I thought, right, let's see how we can bring that into this one. So I wanted to, again, give them black skin, but get some colour in there. So I've chosen to mix some black oil paint here with Bitume, which is this sort of purpley brown colour. And I just sort of mixed it together so I got roughly the look I wanted. I'm not really going to include any ratios in this video, because an awful lot of it was me just putting the paint on the palette or mixing it up until I got it to where I wanted it to be. So what I'll endeavour to do is just explain why I've chosen that particular sort of shade or tone or whatever of a colour. Now you'll have noticed I put that oil paint onto a little piece of kitchen paper, and you'll see it leached out some of the oil from it. That's just going to help this dry quicker. When oil paint takes a long time to cure, and even when we mix it with mineral spirits like we're doing here to make a wash, even once those mineral spirits have evaporated off and it may look dry, the oil's not actually fully cured. It'll take quite a long time to fully cure. So I want to try and do everything I can to speed that process up. I could even, in fact, put some additive into this mix if I wanted to. That's not something I tend to do. But I've leached off a bit of that excess oil, so that should help speed it up. And then also for this video anyway, I'm using just normal DIY shop mineral spirits, or white spirits we call them here in the UK. And the reason for that is they evaporate very quickly, which means for filming, I can get on with the paint job and get cracking. The downside is they stink. So normally, say I was going to paint a unit of 10 of these guys up or whatever, I would use something like Sansador by Winsor & Newton, which is a low odour, so sans odour, no smell. It's not no smell, it's still got a little bit of smell to it, but an artist grade thinner, which is much nicer to work with. But the downside of that thinner in this case is that it prolongs the curing time, prolongs the it prolongs the evaporation time. So you can work with it for longer, which is fantastic if you're, say, painting some piece of 2D canvas artwork or whatever, but actually for our application isn't particularly useful. So yeah, there's, pros and cons to using each. But one of the reasons I wanted to do this step was to try and keep everything as I say, as simple as possible, sort of as army painting as possible. But also, in the past, when we spoke about army painting, often myself and Andy will talk about doing fewer things and execute them all really, really well. So if you're just going to do a base coat, do a really nice base coat. That will look great. So I want to try and just go against everything I've said before, just try new things, force myself, whether that's colours, processes, whatever. So I thought, okay, well, I'm not going to worry about executing everything perfectly. What I'm going to worry about more is the overall feeling I get on the miniature. So is the greater than the sum of its parts, as it were? Is the vibe what I want when I finish the model? Have I enjoyed the process, and does it evoke that feeling, that storytelling element that I want my model to do when it's finished? And not get bogged down in sort of executing everything absolutely perfectly. So once I had applied the oil, I straight away go in, and then with a clean brush, I'm just using some clean mineral spirits here, and I'm just touching those onto the areas of sort of the lightest areas. And what that's going to do is just dilute and dissipate that oil paint out a little bit further. What it's meant is that I haven't had to go back in and do that reductive technique where we remove any of that oil paint at all, which is great because it's just saved me an additional step. And I'm not going to do any more to the skin. I don't want to go back in with my brush at all because that's an extra stage and it would take longer. And I'm trying to see here what can I leave out and still be happy. Now I'm applying a matte varnish here. This is just a finishing varnish, so it's a very thin coat. It's not going to do any protection or anything like that, but it's just going to change the finish on the model, which is a little bit glossy. I think maybe Bitume has a slightly glossy finish, and certainly these sort of have that glossy finish, even though the oil paint looked fairly cured on them. Once that was done, it was time to move on to the fur. So again, endeavouring to introduce a little bit of colour wherever I can. The black fur I've mixed in Rattling Grime and Black Legion, and I'm just going to pop that over any of the black fur, and this will just give me a sort of a base really to work from with it. And I wanted the fur to be a different kind of black to the skin to make it a little bit more interesting. As I say, I'm going to have lots of black next to other blacks, greys next to greys, browns next to browns, tans next to tans, that sort of thing. And I want the model to remain readable. I don't just want it to turn into this murky, dingy mess that I feel like an awful lot of my stuff can end up like sometimes. So just really trying to be conscious of that each time. And I figured as long as I get a decent amount of sort of value variation across the model, so sort of light and dark, if I then introduce a little bit of colour variation as well, we should manage to keep it fairly interesting. So rather than that sort of purpley brown black that we've gone for with the skin, here I'm going to go for more of a blue black. So I've taken Corvus Black and Fenrisian Grey, and I'm just mixing those up and doing a little bit of highlighting on the fur. Now, I'm not worrying about highlighting every single strand to the same level. I'm focusing on making it nice and bright up around his face and up around the top of the model. There's elements of the rest of the mini where I've barely done any painting at all. But I think I don't think that matters. I'm very happy with sort of how it's come out. And again, it's meant that the momentum I've been able to maintain the momentum with this model. It is a brilliant sculpt. I've really enjoyed painting this model. The cast wasn't amazing, sadly. There was quite a lot of gaps, a few slips, and typically that would have really aggravated me, but again, I just tried to let it go, just get on and enjoy the painting. It doesn't matter, the miniature's not for display. It's good enough is good enough, and I'm as I say, will it evoke that feeling I'm after at the end of it? And I warned you at the start, if this ends up being a bit artsy-fartsy and all the rest of it, I'm sorry. But this is all my voyage of discovery, or whatever it is, to do with to do with mini painting. For the hooves, I think this is Steel Legion drab that I've mixed into the black to highlight them with here. I'm pretty sure that's the paint that I had on my palette when I went into the hooves, and it's just lots of little dashes. So dark at the top and lighter towards the bottom. So the cloak is a very large part of the model, for want of a better term. It makes up an awful lot of him. And this was something I thought, well, I can use the bit that I absolutely loved doing on that Death Guard model the other week. I can do that at this stage. And that involves taking very, very dilute mixes of some paints and sort of stippling and scratching and dashing and all sorts of things to create loads and loads of texture. Not physical texture, because the paint's nice and thin and we're sort of applying it properly, but physical, but painted on texture. A bit of life on the miniature. And I have used medium grey in this case, which is the lighter grey, and then the grey I'm using here, reddish grey. So again, although it's a grey, I'm trying not to use any neutral versions of the colours here, so it's keeping it different. And yeah, this is very, very similar to how I did in the Death Guard video, so I don't want to repeat myself too much with that. Also, full disclosure, I've already done the audio for this video once, and it was completely corrupted, which was very disappointing because I did it in a one shot, which I don't normally do, but I was enjoying it so much. And then I went to listen back to it, and yeah, it was not good. So I'm now trying to make sure I'm not forgetting and leaving things out, but also not repeating myself within the same video. But what I found so enjoyable with this sort of process was that you can still show off the sculpt. You can still identify the parts on the model here. I'm focusing on, every time I'm applying these slightly lighter versions of this mix, I'm thinking about, okay, it'd be lighter towards the top, it'd be lighter in this fold, darker in that fold, but I'm not being super, super deliberate with those brushstrokes. And it means you get these sort of weird, patchy, blotchy areas, and I just find them really interesting and enjoyable to look at. And I think they really work for the feeling I'm trying to get with this model. And it's something that I was listening to a podcast this week called Square Based, which is a Warhammer Fantasy or Warhammer Old World podcast, and one of the hosts, Val, on it spoke about how the change from 4th and 5th edition into 6th. So 4th and 5th edition was very, very colourful. It was sort of known as the Red era. And when they changed to 6th edition, everything got a lot more grim-dark. And Val basically described it as putting 5th edition through a sepia, or putting a sepia filter over 5th edition. And I thought that's exactly what I'm trying to achieve with this model. I want those lovely callbacks to that earlier era, but I'd also like the tone of it all to be a little bit grimmer, a little bit darker. I just thought it was a much better way of explaining what I wanted to do than I could come up with. Now, at this stage, I decided there's a sort of third cloak layer. There's his hood, there's this one around his shoulders, and then there's the cloak itself. And I wanted to make the middle one a different colour just to keep it a bit more interesting. And rather than finish the cloak, I wanted to see how that middle layer would look at this point. So I've gone in, I've blacked it out, and then I've just used Steel Legion drab, using thin coats of that, doing loads and loads of scratches to sort of build that up to look like a sort of worn black leather. And I just wanted to see how it would look, so that if I didn't like it, I could just paint it the same as the rest of the cloak, and I wouldn't be too out of step with the stages I was at with it. So you can see now I go back and see what I was talking about before with, you're still focusing on applying the paint into the correct areas, but I'm not worrying about being super, super precise until I get to the very, very end, when I will do a few little sort of very precise dashes, and I think I might use a slightly smaller brush. But that was the other lovely thing. The vast majority of this model was all painted using an Artist Opus Series S size 1. Most of the model was painted with that brush. But you can see there's sort of less stippling and less splodging and more sort of purposeful mark making now. But you just get all this wonderful texture and a life in the cloak, and it's just really, really excites me. And so far, I felt like I could tell what various areas were on the model. So that was a good start. And here, and you see what I mean, I'm going in and I'm putting sort of tippy-tappy edge highlight on here, really. Is it realistic? No, absolutely not. But I'm not worrying about that remotely here. All I'm worried about is how readable can I make the model? Does it look like what I'm intending it to look like? I'm not going to go in and use loads of washes and stuff on the model, so I need to think about how I'm going to separate the different areas so that, again, it doesn't just all sort of mush into one. But the bit of cloth is going to be on most of the goats, just a little loincloth, so it won't take long, at all. But what a lovely opportunity on this guy to just spend a load of time, on this step, because it's something I enjoy to do. It's a way of painting I'm really enjoying doing. So once I'd gone around and finished it all, the middle bit, I'll call it the cowl. I don't think that's what it's called, but the bit that's over his shoulders that I painted, that sort of warm black leather, it just wasn't quite right for me. It wasn't interesting enough. And again, I wanted to create a really boring looking mini that wasn't really boring. So I decided to give it a glaze. And in the end, I settled on Garagak's Sewer, which is quite a rich sort of brown colour. And this is a contrast paint, but I'm using it like a glaze. So I've thinned it down with a little bit of water. And when I say use it like a glaze, I mean we're going to make it a very, very see-through, very translucent layer, so that all the work that we've already done with the black and the steel lesion drab, we're still going to see all of that work. It's not been wasted. We'll still see all those marks. We'll still get the tonal changes. We're just changing it a little bit. We're filtering it with this more rich brown sort of colour. And I'm really, really pleased with how that one came out. Contrast paints are fantastic to use for this. They're very much like an ink. And if you thin them with a little water, they sort of lose some of that contrast property and they just become that lovely sort of saturated see-through paint that lets you do sort of lovely glazing with. So I was feeling pretty good at this stage. It wasn't the murky mess I had been fearing it would be. I thought my buddy Dan is not gonna tell me off for this one. Now, I suppose the other major part of this model is his staff. So I wanted to go through a few different bits and bobs I did. And I'm not going to go blow by blow for absolutely everything I've done on this mini. This is already a long enough tutorial. But I wanted the wood to be this sort of mouldy, manky sort of old wood. And I went back to a video I did years and years ago called Rotten Wood. And I took some of the processes from that. So I've recently been playing with the new P3 paints and really, really enjoying them. And here I wanted a sort of grey-green colour. And I'm going to paint in the highlights on the wood. I'm going to paint some of the wood grain in, but also a lot of it is actually sculpted onto the model. So I'm just picking it out with that grey-green, and then I'm going to give it a wash or a coat of snakebite leather. Now this is one of my favourite. It's absolutely horrible colour. It's this sort of green, yellowy, brown, just orange. It's just horrible. I think it's absolutely perfect for rotting wood. And this was one of the few things I knew that I wanted to do on the model before I actually sat down to paint it. The rest of it is very much making it up as I go along, winging it, and trying to put theory and stuff into practice as I'm going, kind of thing, and still be able to produce a video for you guys in the week, because that's always the challenge. But once it was dry, I was really, really happy. This, I did this at this stage because I knew I wanted the staff to be this colour. So I did it before I did the horns, because I thought the horns could end up being similar, and I would rather change what the horns look like than change what the staff would look like. And at the top of the staff, he's got these lovely big antlers. I thought, well, I can't just do these the usual way that I do my bone colours. I've got to do them different. So I picked up XV88, which is a colour I've used recently, so it's much more yellow. And I decided just to airbrush it on to start with, because it's easier and quicker and I can do it. So I'm just thinned it down about 2 drops of thinner to paint. And then I'm focusing it more towards making the tips of the antlers more opaque with that colour. Absolutely could do it with a brush. I did it with a brush on the little Leering Spirit model. But, there was no worry of sort of overspray because I was doing a sub-assembly which unfortunately, when I pushed it further into this blue tack, the pin smashed straight through his hand and came out the front, which was really upsetting. But again, rather than get derailed and upset, my buddy Tom was like, just don't worry about it, paint it black, carry on, otherwise you'll never finish. It's like, yeah, finish not perfect, don't worry about it, it's not got to go on display, just enjoy. So yeah, tried not to rage too hard about that when that one happened. But yeah, I guess it's worth being conscious of when you're pinning resin stuff. Like, don't go too deep with a pin and push too hard, because there's less resistance in the resin than there is in the cork that I'm pushing it into. So here I'm just going back in with the XV88 and continuing the colour towards the sort of, reinforcing that colour towards the tips. And then I start to mix in a little Karak stone as well. Now, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to those of you that support us over on Patreon. Without you guys, Andy and I couldn't do this full time. In fact, because of you, we've just been able to bring Ben on full time, and he'll be producing tutorials as well as other things for the business, and I can't wait. And it's all down to the support from you guys over there. So if you'd like to support us and get a bunch of extra content, Andy does some absolutely wonderful videos over on Patreon. It's usually Andy. And they're often 3-4 parters to do with his display stuff, his competition winning Golden Demon pieces, things like that. But also, I think the last few weeks he's just been doing a few Space Marines for friends, which is fun as well. But yeah, we Cult wouldn't be here without the support from our patrons. So if you want to support us, get a bit of extra content, consider going and checking that out. And if for any reason you can't support us there, then likes and comments and subscriptions on the YouTube channel also make a huge difference. So if you're still watching this 20 odd minutes in and you're enjoying it, bang that like button. It does make a big difference. It really helps with things like visibility, which when you're a channel like ours that doesn't really concentrate on clickbait and stuff, it's pretty important. So thank you to all of you that do that. Now, one of the reasons I'm jabbering on over this rather than explaining it is because I've done an entire video entitled How to Paint Bone and Horns, and I'm just following what I've done in that video on this, and that's to say it's a deep dive video. It's a technique toolbox, goes into it in far better footage and detail than I've done here. But you'll notice on the horn I applied that green glaze at the end, again just to help differentiate it from the staff and the antlers. And again, I'm really happy at this point. I went a little bit brighter and then used the green as well on there. So he's got this little chum, Kralmaw. He's got this leering spirit, and it was a great opportunity actually, this model, to check out that black skin recipe. Did it work fairly well? You'll have noticed I've been painting that Beast Lord model alongside this. Sadly, I didn't finish him in time for the video, and I didn't want to rush him. So yeah, perhaps I'll finish him off. I don't know. I probably can't do another video over here on him, but maybe a short or maybe a little video over on Patreon or something. But let me know if you'd like to see me finish him. The main difference being that on Kralmaw and this guy, there's not really any metals anywhere, so I'm not entirely sure how I would do the silvers and the golds and stuff on the army if I was to do an army of it. And I have picked up the battalion with the intentions of doing some more. So yeah, there's still a bit more experimenting to be done with that. But yeah, he's a lovely little model to paint, this guy. I'd paint this type of model all day long. I love painting bone and horn and skin and stuff, so he was just perfect really for that. But it's just this full process. Everything I'm doing here I explain in much more detail in the bone and horn video. But I didn't just want this whole video to be bam 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 done. I wanted to try and show you some of the processes and talk about what I was doing. The antlers, I decided to do the same as I've done the antlers on the staff. So again, it was just a good way of adding into my recipe book different kind of bone and horn recipes. And already, I've got, much like his staff, I suppose, I've got the wood here on the stump. I've got the bone of the skull. I've got the yellow of the antlers, and I was just focusing on ensuring that there was different colours in each one, so that they stood out next to each other without me needing to do big heavy washes and stuff to differentiate them. For the eyes, I wanted to do a little sort of creepy glow thing, but I didn't want to go full OSL with them. Partly because I just wasn't sure. Maybe I should have been a bit braver and done that. It's not a technique I'm overly comfortable with doing, and it's something I would like to perfect a little bit more. But I guess I've got to start at some point, right? So perhaps I should have done on this guy. But initially, all I'm doing is just washing in a bit of white. And the nice thing is when you wash in that white paint, it sits really nice and opaque in the recesses, which when you then apply something like this contrast paint over the top, you just get this really lovely punchy sort of outline, and very, very easy to create this sort of kind of glow sort of effect. And then just to finish it off, I've taken Tesseract Glow, which is sort of a fluorescent green colour, mixed in a little white paint, so I'm able to use it more like a paint and less like a contrast paint. And then I've just done a little dot towards the centre, again just to try and sell that glow effect a little bit more. And there he is, creepy little lad. The next part is something that probably caused me the most stress on the model. I really wanted to do red claws, the red nails on them, because that's what they had back in 5th edition. I love that of that era. But I started putting it on and I thought, oh my goodness, I'm painting this like my nan used to have her nails. That was not the intention. And even though it was this really boring red, this Wordbearers Red, sat against the rest of the model, I was terrified. I was like, oh god, this is way over the top. This looks ridiculous. So I decided to knock it back a little. I've used Rattling Grime here to knock it back a touch. And then what I did was highlight it back up using the Wordbearers Red, but also mixing in a little, probably Karak Stone, might have been Rakarth Flesh, whatever the lighter colour was on my palette. Just work that back up as a highlight. And in the end, I was much happier with that mix. It wasn't quite so in your face. Again, maybe a little cowardly, but baby steps, right? Then he's got in his beard, he's got this sort of totemic sort of runestone type thing. And I thought, well, I can't paint it like a sort of grey rock, can I? Because it's in the middle of a load of grey fur and grey this, that and the other. So in the end, I just did a few little scratches on there and then used Eldari Emerald, little glaze over the top just to give it that sort of, maybe not quite jade, but that sort of, onyx jade, that type of green, semi-precious stone. At this point, I thought I was more or less done. Could not have been more wrong. Turns out that Kralmaw has more detail and gubbins and fetishes and nonsense on his staff and his cloak than the entire rest of the model combined. So one of them is these bits of a dead elf, which turned out to be really nicely sculpted, really interesting, so I had to do a decent job on them. So I used Rakarth Flesh, and then I used a couple of purple and pink contrasts and just started layering them up, mixing them in together to highlight it up. Nothing complicated. The sculpt's doing an awful lot of work here, but it was such a nice sculpt, and the fact it was an elf as well was made it that much more enjoyable to paint. A desecrated one on the staff. So here I'm just again mixing in the Rakarth with the pale, I think it was Dreadful Visage contrast paint, and then I wanted to do a bit of sort of horrible dried in blood and gore. So I've just taken the red I already had and mixed in a little bit of brown. And here I'm just sort of stippling it in various different mixes to create that sort of wet, sodden, bloody sort of wounds from where the cordage and stuff is attaching it to the antlers. But again, really, really fun to paint. But and again, great sculpt. But man, like you do this and then you find, oh, there's 3 teeth over here. Oh, here's a dead bird, and then here's 14 more bones and a bell and some more cords and some great fun. And then the hair I just painted like a green blonde colour because another buddy of mine, Dan, he collects wood elves and this is his favourite colour for their hair. So I thought I would paint them like that to try and upset him. That's Dan, actually, 9 Inch Charge, another cracking Old World podcast over on YouTube. So go and check that out if you're interested. But yeah, I'm really happy here with the balance that I've achieved. So the staff I think is looking interesting. It's got lots of different elements, but I don't think they draw too much attention from the face, which is really, really key. But they do sort of help frame it as well, I think. So time for the finishing varnish. So much like before, it's another matte varnish. Just spraying it over the top just to unify the finish we've got on the model, because particularly where I've used things like contrast paint, it's a little bit glossy and I don't really like the finish. So I've just used a matte varnish there to smooth that finish out a little. Now I've been using and sort of digging into the P3 paints a bit more. I was talking about that, I think, over on our Twitch channel. So consider jumping on there and joining in. Mondays we just do a hobby hangout for a few hours and just do some personal hobby and try different things out. But P3 is a set of paints I've picked up, and this copper colour, there's 3 little cowbells on him. I thought, oh yeah, like 3 little copper cowbells look quite smart. And because we've matted down the rest of the model, it means that if I use my metallics at this stage and these other effects at this stage, they'll have that nice little contrast of finish where they'll look a little bit different. to the rest of the model. And I've just followed the sort of verdigris video that we do on those. And then a little bit of blood for the blood god, just to add a bit more gore and grisliness to the elf lad here, who's having a great day. Yeah. Lots of fun. Then the base. Now, you may have seen I've been doing the base at various stages of the paint job, but I thought I would leave it in one stage in the video. And much like the rest of it, I'm just trying out new things, trying out new products. Again, something we talked about on Twitch quite recently was this kraut cover stuff. It's this like various pre-mixed basing mixes, and I absolutely love them. I'm going to be using them loads in various projects. I picked up a load of them when I was up at Incon Gaming, and yeah, they're absolutely cracking. So I've started off using Dark Earth, which is a texture paste by AK. I really like the AK texture pastes. There's lots of different textures and colours they come in, and they also act as an adhesive, which again, for reducing the amount of steps to build a base with, I really like. So I can just push these little tufts. These are some mini nature tufts here. I can just push some of those in. I love the mini nature tufts. They're well worth sort of searching out. They're the best tufts by a country mile, I think, that I've used. They're just not in every shop. So you just got to go hunting for them, but a cracking different mix of options you got with them. And then this is the kraut cover mix called Grimdark, which is full of all these wonderful different sort of grades and colours of little stones, but then it's also got little skulls and bones and things in it as well, which is wicked. But I loved that variety of colours so much that I just didn't feel any need to paint on top of it, so I've just sort of left it as is, which again for army painting reduces a bunch of steps, right? So I'm pretty confident. I'm going to paint 10 gauze up. I think doing old world, you've got to paint 10 before you know if it's going to work for a scheme. But I'm pretty confident, even though these are the sort of newest goats I've been painting, bar some of the Warcry stuff. I think it will translate well onto the older sculpts, onto the older gauze and stuff. And then for the rims, well, I was trying to be brave. I thought, okay, it's doing green. So I've used one of these AK play markers. I'm going to talk about those a bit more in an upcoming video. And I was being brave. It was going on fairly nice. I was applying it well, but I couldn't hack it when it dried. It was just too much, too over the top for me. So I grabbed a darker grey. I think this was called Wag Flesh or something like that. One of the GW greens, and it was all right. It was a bit like the one I used on the skeletons, which I think was the last Old World video we did. It was pretty good, but yeah, again, not quite right. So in the end, I just opted for Deathcore Drab, which is still kind of green, right? It's just yeah, I've fallen back into old habits, I guess. But I was a lot more comfortable with this. In the end of the day, it's my mini, right? So I was a lot happier and more comfortable. I still felt like there was that homage to the old style with the green, but it was more to my taste, and more like, Val said, that sort of sepia filter over the top of it. But yeah, in the end, I'm really, really happy with how it came out. So there we go, him and his little chum, looking, I think, pretty cool. Certainly, I'm happy enough. They've gone straight in the cabinet, and they're now eagerly awaiting some goatee friends to turn up. But of course, I've got the dwarves I still need to finish. I've got a unit of hammers on the desk at the minute, so I've got them looking at me. And then there's Cathay coming soon. I mean, we're getting all the Warcom articles on it at the minute, so it can't be long. So I'd really like to at least do a little bit of Cathay for the channel and for me. I hope you guys would like to see some of that. Let me know in the comments, actually, because I hope it's going to be interesting and I hope people want to see it. But if no one does, that's a lot of effort to go into a video, so we'll see. But have I got time to do Beastmen before then? I'm not sure, but I've ordered the battalion box, so we'll see. And then obviously the most important thing, really, alongside these two guys, was the Bacon Baguette. So those of you that know of the article, Tale of Four Gamers, the first month Paul had £1.25 left in his budget, and rather than roll it over to next month, he went and got a bacon baguette. So I thought I couldn't really do this video without getting one of those. But yeah, I'm really glad I got to do this. I've enjoyed every element of it. Some of it hasn't worked, but some of it I think has. I definitely don't think it looks too murky, which I'm really happy about. But also, yeah, I never got to meet Paul. I wish I had. I wish I could have shook his hand and said thank you, because you know, he is a significant reason I think I do this for a living. You know, seeing the sort of stuff he did as a professional, and that sort of fun and aspiration and inspiration and stuff he was able to do it all within the hobby. And yeah, you know, if you're not aware of who he is, go and check him out. Paul, after he left Games Workshop, went to go and found Warlord Games, and so stayed in the hobby for most of his adult life. So yeah, just really grateful to everything he did, particularly for the Warhammer hobby, and I'm really glad I finally got to do this after 30 odd years of wanting to try this Beastman scheme out. So if you've got any questions about anything I've done in the video, pop them down in the comments and I'll be sure to get back to you as soon as I can. If there's any other old world stuff you'd like me to cover on the channel, again, let me know. I'm really keen to do it. It's my passion, really, so the more I get to do, the better, but it's only worth doing if you guys actually want to watch it. And I guess I'm sorry for such a long, waffly video, but I've just enjoyed it, and I hope you guys have enjoyed listening to it as well. This is the type of one I really love making. Hopefully there was a few little tips or tricks or something in there that you might be able to apply to your own hobby as well. If not, I hope it kept you company for half an hour or so while you're doing some painting of your own. So take care, and I'll see you next time.